On February 19, 2026, a day that will go down in the history of the British monarchy, the unthinkable happened. A man who was born a prince, raised inside one of the most powerful royal families on earth. A man who once sailed as a naval officer in the Falklands War. A man whose mother was Queen Elizabeth II herself, was arrested. Not in some far-off country. Not in a Hollywood scandal. But in England. By British police. On his own 66th birthday. And the charges? Misconduct in public office. The allegation? That he secretly forwarded classified government documents to one of the most dangerous and despicable criminals in modern history, Jeffrey Epstein. For years, the world watched Andrew stumble from one controversy to the next. For years, he denied everything. He denied knowing Virginia Giuffre. He denied wrongdoing. He even sat down for one of the most disastrous television interviews in royal history, on BBC Newsnight, where he claimed he couldn't sweat, that he was at a Pizza Express in Woking, and that he had no memory of ever meeting the teenage girl who said he abused her. The world didn't believe him then. And today, after 11 hours in a police station on his birthday, the world is watching even more closely. But here's what makes this story even bigger than the arrest itself: the emails, the classified documents, the secret messages, the photographs of him kneeling over a woman on the floor, surrounded by the shadow of Ghislaine Maxwell. This is not a tabloid story anymore. This is history. This is the moment the Epstein files finally came for a member of the British royal family. And nobody, not King Charles, not the palace, not even the British government, can make it go away. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened on February 19, 2026, you need to understand the full arc of this story. A story that stretches back more than 2 decades. Andrew Albert Christian Edward was born on February 19, 1960. The third child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. He was for a time the golden boy of the royal family. He flew helicopters in the Falklands War in 1982, earning genuine military credibility. He was second in line to the throne at birth. He was considered dashing, charming, and full of potential. But somewhere along the way, things started to go wrong. His marriage to Sarah Ferguson, widely known as Fergie, was marked by scandals of its own. The couple divorced in 1996. His personal life became tabloid fodder. Then, in the early 2000s, a far more dangerous association began to take shape. Andrew became close, deeply, inexplicably close, to an American financier named Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was not a normal man. He moved in elite circles, befriending presidents, scientists, hedge fund managers, and royalty. He had a private island, Little St. James in the U.S. Virgin Islands, that became known, after his arrest in 2019, as a site of horrific sexual abuse. He had a Manhattan townhouse. He had a private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express by the press, that ferried the powerful and the well-connected to his various properties. Andrew's friendship with Epstein was documented extensively. Photographs of them walking together in Central Park in 2010, after Epstein had already been convicted of soliciting prostitution from a minor in 2008. That alone raised enormous red flags. Why was a senior British royal maintaining a friendship with a registered sex offender? Andrew's office at the time said the visit was to say goodbye to Epstein in person, a justification that the British public found not only unconvincing but genuinely alarming. Then came Virginia Roberts Giuffre. Giuffre alleged, under oath in court documents and in her own words, that Jeffrey Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell had trafficked her to powerful men, including Andrew. She said she was 17 years old. She said she was brought to London and forced to have sex with Andrew on multiple occasions. She named a specific location, a townhouse in London belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell. She said there was a photograph of them together, with Andrew's arm around her waist. That photograph was real. It was published. Andrew insisted it was fake. He insisted it was doctored. He insisted he had never met her. In November 2019, Andrew sat down for what became one of the most catastrophic interviews in modern television history. On BBC Newsnight, he told the world that he had no memory of meeting Virginia Giuffre. He said he had a medical condition that prevented him from sweating. A strange detail relevant because Giuffre had described him as sweating profusely on the dance floor. He said that on the night she claimed they met, he had been at a Pizza Express restaurant in Woking with his daughter Princess Beatrice. The interview was intended to clear his name. Instead, it destroyed his reputation. Within days, he stepped back from all royal duties. His public role was over. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice formally requested an interview with Andrew as part of its criminal investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's network. The DOJ said publicly, repeatedly, that Andrew had not cooperated with their investigation, despite the former prince's claims to the contrary. In 2021, Virginia Giuffre filed a civil lawsuit against Andrew in New York. In 2022, Andrew settled that lawsuit for an undisclosed sum. He made no admission of guilt. But the settlement itself, the decision to pay rather than fight, told its own story. Queen Elizabeth II, just months before her death, quietly stripped her son of his military titles and royal patronages. His Highness title was removed. He became simply Prince Andrew, rather than a working royal. And then came 2025, and everything got worse. In October 2025, the the late Virginia Roberts Giuffre's posthumous memoir was released. Titled Nobody's Girl, it described in explicit and devastating detail what she said Epstein and his associates had done to her. It named names. It named Andrew. The book became an international bestseller. It reignited public outrage. King Charles III, who had been careful publicly about how he handled his brother, was forced to act. In October 2025, Charles initiated a formal process to strip Andrew of all remaining royal titles. Andrew was no longer His Royal Highness. He was no longer the Duke of York. He was no longer Prince Andrew. He became, legally and officially, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. And he was asked to leave his home, the 30-room Royal Lodge in Windsor, where he had lived for years, a property subsidized by the Crown. But what came next was something nobody expected, not even those who had followed this story closely for years. On January 30th, 2026, the U.S. Department of Justice released a massive new tranche of documents in what had become known as the Epstein Files. This release, mandated under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, contained over 3.5 million documents, 180,000 images, and 2,000 videos. It was an almost incomprehensible volume of material. Newsrooms around the world scrambled to comb through it. AI tools were deployed. Investigative teams worked around the clock. And buried deep inside that mountain of documents were emails. Emails signed simply with the initial A. Emails whose signature block read, HRH the Duke of York KG, Andrew's former title. These emails were addressed to Jeffrey Epstein, and they contained confidential British government documents. Here is what the documents revealed. In November 2010, just minutes after receiving official trade mission reports from his special advisor Amit Patel, Andrew forwarded those reports directly to Jeffrey Epstein. No explanation, no message, just classified British government trade documents. Reports from his official visits as the UK's special representative for international trade and investment, sent to a convicted sex offender. The documents included sensitive visit reports from Vietnam, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shenzhen, China. They also included what was described in the emails as a confidential brief produced by the Provincial Reconstruction Team in Helmand Province for international investment opportunities. A document dealing with sensitive investment intelligence from Afghanistan, where British military forces were actively operating at the time. In one of the emails, Andrew explicitly described what he was sending as a confidential brief, and said he was forwarding it to Epstein to seek his comments, views, or ideas as to whom I could also usefully show this to attract some interest. In other words, he was asking Epstein, a convicted sex criminal with no official standing in the British government, to help him leverage classified intelligence for business purposes. The photographs released alongside these documents were no less disturbing. The Department of Justice published images showing a man who appeared to be Andrew kneeling over a woman lying on the floor, whose face had been redacted. Other photos showed him reclining across the laps of several women while Ghislaine Maxwell stood nearby, smiling. One image showed him grabbing a woman's waist at a nightclub. An FBI report in the files described a nightclub incident in which Epstein and Maxwell asked Andrew to guess the age of a girl. He guessed 17 correctly, and the report alleged that Andrew then grabbed her waist and fondled her on the dance floor, before going with her to Maxwell's London residence. The UK public was outraged. The anti-monarchy group Republic filed a formal complaint with Thames Valley Police, calling on them to investigate whether Andrew had committed misconduct in public office. The maximum sentence for this offense in the United Kingdom is life imprisonment. Thames Valley Police confirmed on February 9th that they were formally assessing the complaint. 2 weeks later, on February 19th, Andrew's 66th birthday, they acted. Police vehicles arrived at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk before 7 a.m. Officers simultaneously executed search warrants at Royal Lodge in Berkshire, Andrew's former home where he had only recently been forced to leave, and at the Wood Farm property where he had been temporarily staying while waiting for his new home, Marsh Farm, to be renovated. Andrew was arrested at the property. He was taken to Aylsham Police Station in Norfolk, where he underwent nearly 12 hours of questioning. Photographs captured him hours later, slouched in the back of a chauffeur-driven car as he was released from custody. The image traveled around the world instantly. The New York Post ran it on their front page with the headline, "The Prince of Darkness." The Times of London ran it straight, "The Arrest of Andrew." Newspapers in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Japan all ran the same photograph. The man once called a senior royal, the son of a queen, second in line to the British throne, leaving a police station under criminal investigation. Thames Valley Police issued a statement saying that a man in his 60s from Norfolk had been released under investigation. This status, released under investigation, or RUI, is specific to British law. It means the suspect has not been charged, but he has also not been cleared. The investigation is active. A decision on whether to formally charge him will be made by the Crown Prosecution Service, potentially within weeks, potentially within months. No timeline has been given. The CPS confirmed it was in informal contact with Thames Valley Police, but had not yet offered any early investigative advice. And here is the extraordinary irony at the heart of this case. If Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is ever charged with misconduct in public office and brought to trial in the United Kingdom, The case would be listed in court records as the King v. Mountbatten Windsor. It would be the king, Andrew's own brother, Charles III, versus the former prince. It would be the power of the British crown being brought to bear against the very man who was born into that crown. King Charles responded swiftly. In a statement signed personally, not issued through Buckingham Palace in the usual manner, but signed Charles R. The monarch said he had learned with the deepest concern the news of his brother's arrest. He added, "What now follows is the full, fair, and proper process by which this issue is investigated in the appropriate manner and by the appropriate authorities. In this, as I have said before, they have our full and wholehearted support and cooperation. Let me state clearly, the law must take its course. As this process continues, it would not be right for me to comment further on this matter." The statement was described by royal commentators as unprecedented in its directness. By explicitly stating that the law must take its course and pledging cooperation with the police, the king was, in effect, publicly distancing himself from his own brother. A couple walking near the Sandringham estate told reporters they found the king's statement pretty brutal. Prince William and Princess Kate, through an aide, confirmed their full support for the king's statement. Neither has made a public statement of their own. Princess and Andrew's older sister was asked by a reporter as she arrived at a public engagement the following day how she felt about her brother's arrest. She did not respond. The reaction from the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre was raw and deeply emotional. Giuffre had died by suicide in 2025, at the age of 41, never seeing the moment she had fought for. Her brother-in-law Sky Roberts and his wife Amanda told Reuters they had been woken at 3 a.m. with the news of the arrest. "It was such a mixed bag of emotions," Amanda said. "Initially we were like vindicated and screaming, and then, it just hits you. That gut punch. She's not here to see this. We're not able to call her." In a separate statement, the family wrote, "At last. Today, our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. He was never a prince. For survivors everywhere, Virginia did this for you." Searches of Andrew's former home at Royal Lodge in Berkshire continued through Friday, February 20th. Unmarked vans were photographed entering the grounds. Police confirmed that searches of that property would continue through at least Monday. Searches at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate had already been concluded. Officers removed materials as part of the investigation. The British government announced, on the same day, that it was now actively considering legislation to remove Andrew Mountbatten Windsor from the royal line of succession entirely. Despite having been stripped of all titles, Andrew still technically remains eighth in line to the British throne, a legal quirk that requires an act of parliament to resolve. Chief Secretary to the Treasury James Murray said the government was not ruling anything out. A YouGov poll conducted in the immediate aftermath of the arrest found that 82% of British people believe Andrew should be removed from the line of succession. Such a move would be the first of its kind since King Edward VIII abdicated in 1936. There is one significant complication. Removing a named individual from the line of succession requires not just an act of the British Parliament, but also the agreement of more than a dozen other countries, including Canada, Australia, Jamaica, and New Zealand, where the British monarch serves as the head of state. It is a lengthy, politically complex process, but the momentum behind it has never been stronger. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the implications of Andrew's arrest are resonating inside the United States Congress. Members of the House Oversight Committee had already requested that Andrew submit to a transcribed interview as part of their own Epstein investigations. He has not responded to that request. Vice President J.D. Vance said earlier this month that he would certainly be open to Andrew testifying before Congress. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who has been under enormous pressure himself, having appointed former British Ambassador Peter Mandelson to a senior diplomatic post despite Mandelson also being named in the Epstein files, suggested publicly that Andrew should cooperate with U.S. investigators. And speaking of the Epstein files' broader reach, Andrew is not the only prominent British figure caught up in the latest revelations. Peter Mandelson, one of the most powerful political figures in recent Labour Party history, has also been named in the documents as potentially having shared confidential information with Epstein. The Metropolitan Police in London confirmed an investigation into Mandelson's actions earlier in February 2026. Mandelson, who was dismissed from his ambassadorial post, denies any wrongdoing. Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife, is also mentioned in the Epstein files as having maintained a personal correspondence with Epstein long after his 2008 conviction. Royal historians have described the situation as unlike anything seen in modern British history. Sarah Gristwood, a royal historian and author, told NBC News she could not think of anything like this in modern times. She noted that while plenty of senior royals had been imprisoned in centuries past, in the Tudor and Stuart eras, it had always been on political grounds, never as a common criminal suspect. NBC News royal commentator Daisy McAndrew said the situation was, in many ways, a lot more serious for the royal family than the death of Princess Diana. At least then, she said, the damage was confined to public perception of how the Queen handled grief. This is different. This is a criminal investigation. The question everyone is now asking is, what comes next? The Crown Prosecution Service will, in the coming weeks or months, review the evidence gathered by Thames Valley Police, including the materials seized from 2 of Andrew's homes, and make a determination about whether to formally charge him with misconduct in public office. That charge carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment under British law. Legal experts note, however, that the threshold for conviction is high. The prosecution would need to prove not only that Andrew shared the documents, but that he did so willfully, knowing he was abusing the public trust vested in him as trade envoy. Andrew's legal team will almost certainly argue that the sharing of documents was informal, that no national security harm resulted, and that no criminal intent was present. But Andrew faces another problem. His own past statements, his BBC Newsnight interview, his years of public denials. All of that will be scrutinized now under a far harsher light. The emails signed A, the signature block identifying him as the Duke of York, the minutes-long gap between receiving classified documents and forwarding them to Epstein. This is physical, documentary evidence. Not allegations. Not memory. Documents. The Epstein files have not finished revealing their secrets. 3.5 million documents. Investigators around the world are still digging. More names may emerge. More arrests may follow. And for the British royal family, already navigating the illnesses of King Charles, the estrangement of Prince Harry, and the relentless scrutiny of a post-Elizabeth era, this is a crisis with no clear end. On the night of February 19, 2026, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly His Royal Highness Prince Andrew, Duke of York, Knight of the Garter, son of Queen Elizabeth, sat in the back of a car and was driven to his temporary accommodation on the Sandringham estate, where his own brother, the King, had allowed him to stay because he had nowhere else to go. He has denied all wrongdoing. His future is uncertain. His reputation is in ruins. And somewhere, in a courtroom yet to be determined, in a case file yet to be opened, his brother's name, the King's name, may one day appear at the top of the page opposite his own. No one in Britain saw this birthday coming, and no one knows how this story ends.